Where are my notes? All right.
Good evening, social media.
Good evening, social media.
And as if on cue, my cat comes over to me. I feel like he loves Monday Night Scuttlebutt.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Good evening and welcome to the Veterans Breakfast Club Scuttlebutt. I'm Todd DiPastino, a host and executive director of the Veterans Breakfast Club. And this Scuttlebutt, this Monday evening program is streamed live on YouTube and Facebook, and also here in Zoom. It's intended as a platform where veterans and non-veterans like me and like my friend and colleague, Sean Hall. Hello, Sean.
Good evening, everyone.
Where we could have conversations, share stories, ask questions, and have conversations about the military experience, past and present. We get together every week on Monday nights at 7 p.m. and most Thursday nights at 7 p.m. And tonight we have open conversation. And what that means is we encourage you to bring the subjects and the topics you want to discuss, the issues you want to, toss around. Sean and I certainly have plenty that we would like to discuss. You could put your ideas in the chat here on the Zoom side. If you're watching on YouTube and Facebook, also feel free to put subjects that you'd like to talk about in the comments or in the chat. I see we have Ron Gianta. We want him to talk about his son, Anthony, Air Force National Guard veteran who passed away recently. I think I see Alex Sebi. He is a USMC veteran, and he has a wonderful project called Words of Veterans. We want him to talk about it. Mark Burnett has been doing wonderful service, creating a massive database of all Marines who served at Camp Lejeune. Mark himself was born and raised Camp Lejeune, drank the water, now has Parkinson's disease, and he wants to encourage people who are entitled to compensation for their exposure to the water at Camp Lejeune to file their claims before the due date, which is coming up, I believe, in 5 days. There's a wonderful contest at the website togetherweserve.com. I think many of you are familiar with that. What's the best child that you ever ate in the military? What's the worst child? They've gotten some good responses. It's a essay contest, and I thought we might ask the same questions here. A couple people emailed me saying that they wanted to talk about Lieutenant William Calley, who died last week at age 80. He was the infamously convicted of murder in the My Lai massacre of 1968, the only American soldier to be convicted in that case. We could talk about him. We could talk about that case. Very controversial, of course. But there's one thing that caught my attention a couple weeks ago that I've been eager to talk with you all about. It's also controversial, I think, very sensitive issue. It has to do with the definition of a Gold Star family. And I see Becky Nyron. Becky, thank you for joining us. I'm very grateful that you joined us, Becky, a Gold Star wife, joining us tonight. I read an article in the Washington Post that talked about how the Pentagon had a working group that was investigating whether whether the official definition of the Gold Star family should be broadened to include not only those on active duty or on drill status and reserve duty who die in combat, who are killed in action, but also to include those who die of disease or suicide or in a car accident. And it turns out that the military community and the veterans community is very much split on this issue. It's a painful and divisive issue. I thought we could bring it up because, in the veterans and military community, we talk a lot about, I think, distinctions among veterans. This has come up recently also in some emails that have gone around about who's a combat veteran, who should count as a combat veteran. There's these distinctions that we have in the military community and the veterans community separate us from each other. I think the distinctions are often important to make, but I think we get into trouble, and I'm editorializing here, when we start to create a hierarchy among these distinctions. And I think that's what some Gold Star family members feel. about the differences between Gold Star families and next of kin, as they're officially called, families. So I thought I would just kind of brief you on what the Washington Post article said, and then open it up for debate, discussion, and your perspectives, because I think this issue, while seemingly having to do only with the Gold Star family issue, actually, I think can be broadened to other distinctions that are made among veterans in the veterans community. This is the Washington Post article that prompted it. I did not share it in our weekly e-newsletter, our VBC bulletin, because it's a paywall issue. If you don't subscribe to the Washington Post, you wouldn't be able to access it. The headline is Pentagon Confronts Gold Star Divide Among Grieving Military Families. Pictured here is Andy Weiss. He is one of those grieving military family members. His son died in June 2012 of suicide, of March 2012 of suicide. And he feels slighted that he does not have one of these lapel pins on the left. The Gold Star lapel pin was created during World War II in 1942 by an act of Congress, and it was designated to be awarded to family members next of kin of those who were killed in action. Since 1942, it's been expanded a bit to include, of course, those who die in terrorist action, those who die in peacekeeping force, maybe those who are killed by friendly fire. But the idea is that there needs to be some kind of, as they say today, kinetic, violent activity taken around where the action was happened, where the life was taken. Next of kin for those people who die killed in action receive a Gold Star lapel button with that purple background. Next to that Gold Star lapel button is what's called the next of kin lapel button. And this, I believe, I could be wrong, but I think this was created in 1973 as a kind of adjunct to the Gold Star lapel button. This is for those who die, family members of those who die in service, those who die in uniform, on active duty, on reserve duty, but who die of something other than combat-related death. They commit suicide, as Andy Weiss's son did. They maybe die of illness, cancer, maybe even service-connected illness. They die in a car wreck. These are the pins that those family members are awarded. I did not anticipate that it would be such a controversial thing. And I think it was the Biden administration requested a working group be formed by the Pentagon to address this issue of whether the Gold Star lapel button should be the definition of a Gold Star family officially that would receive a Gold Star lapel button would be officially broadened to include those who died of non-combat related deaths, of causes. The working group met, they deliberated, they wrote a report, and the Pentagon has not released that report. Apparently, by the time the report was ready to be released, I think the Pentagon had realized what a hot button issue this had become and decided that further consideration was required. So we don't know what the working group recommended. We do know, however, that several veterans organizations, veterans nonprofits, ones that you know and heard about, are very much split on this issue. On the side arguing that the buttons should be, or the lapel pin should be awarded, the definition of the Gold Star family should be broadened to those killed in non-combat related actions. Those include the MOAA, the Military Officers of America Association, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, TAPS, Blue Star Families, Gold Star Wives of America, American Gold Star Mothers, America's Gold Star Families. These are all organizations that endorse the idea of broadening the definition of a Gold Star family member. Those who want to keep the narrow definition include mainline veterans organizations, Wounded Warriors, the American Legion. I'm not sure about the VFW, the Travis Manion Foundation, and the IAVA all want to keep the narrower definition. And I'm just curious, about what you all think of this. And again, this is a painful subject to talk about. This is a personal subject. As one, I think that the article did a fine job of explaining that, you know, some families feel that they have that their grief, that there's a hierarchy of grief that's created when you make these distinctions. Others have said it's, you know, it's really important to keep these distinctions in place. And so I trust that we have a platform here where we could have a respectful and considerate conversation about this. Bob Flage, um, you want to be the first to weigh in? I'll ask you to unmute.
Yes, sir. Jacksonville is having that very same issue regarding that memorial wall that I sent you pictures of.
Yes.
Previously, we've got the largest wall outside of DC, but they're all basically combat deaths. And there's been discussion now whether or not suicides and rollover cars and whatever, you know, brawls and whatever, that these people be added to the wall. And there's there's a strong feeling that no, they shouldn't. That it's like you say, it's a combat death that that took the person uh, heroically versus non-heroically.
And I think that's the painful distinction, is you get the sense that those who die on the battlefield are heroes, whereas those who maybe die in other circumstances don't warrant the recognition or the honorific of hero. And I think that's a very hard thing to ask a family to accept. Do we have anybody else who wants to weigh in on this difficult? Ron Giunta, you just lost your son, Air Force veteran Anthony Giunta. Ron, you are a retired Air Force colonel.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. First, besides being retired military, 32 years, 3 months service, combination Air National Guard and United States Air Force. Being a veteran of Operation Desert Shield Storm, Operations Enduring Freedom, Noble Eagle, all the way through Iraqi Freedom, being on active duty from September 18th of 2001, all the way through to 1 June of 12, when the military said, you have to retire, 30 years commissioned service, you're done, okay? I've seen a lot, I've heard a lot. I've worked with OSDRA, Office of Secretary of Defense for Reserve Affairs, worked on a lot of policy issues, a lot of manpower issues. You know, I've worked with wounded warriors, you know, veterans wounded, reserve guardsmen wounded coming home, not getting a fair shake and, you know, and trying to get the care they needed. I worked for the Veterans Benefit Administration for 6 years, you know that, and worked with a lot of veterans. So this is going to be my take, not anybody else's take, but my take of what you're talking about. We have two types of wounds. We have the wounds sustained in battle that kill. We also have wounds that are sustained in battle that eventually take a life that we're trying to save from that battle. And that's the battle wound, okay, that kills the soldier, the airman, whatever. Now we have another wound, the wound that is not visible to the human eye, the wound that stays with every service member, the wound that's in the heart, that's in the mind, that we call PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just today, it's with Todd, we've talked about this. We talked about this at one of those breakfasts where I heard a World War II veteran talk about how they liberated Dachau prison. And I heard him crying when he was describing it. He's suffering from PTSD, and I can say that he never got help. These are wounds that are buried in their hearts and in their minds that they bring home with them, okay? Sometimes these wounds keep festering and festering to the point that if veterans don't get help, There's older things they turn to in life that they're not focused on what they should be focused on. They're not focused on their driving. They get in an accident and they get killed. Okay. Or they're daydreaming, or something comes to their mind, or something happens. They're on the job. They're not focusing because all of a sudden they have a flashback, and now they're operating heavy equipment and they have an accident on the job because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing because they're not focused on their job, or they drink, or they do drugs,
Yes.
or something.
Yeah.
These are people who are carrying the burden of what they saw in the battlefield. And oh, by the way, let's talk about the people that operate the Predators from the trailers out in Nevada. You're operating a Predator aircraft and you're sitting there and everything is in infrared. Okay. And I've watched these films. Okay. I've watched them where the Predator comes in and you see 3 heat images, a truck and 2 human bodies. And all of a sudden you see a flash. And now all you see is a wrecked heat image and about 15, 20 heat images all over the ground, which were actually 2 human beings.
Ron, I'm going to interrupt you just to ask, do you think after, all you've described of the invisible wounds that so many suffer after being exposed to war, do you think that it's right that we do separate those who are, say, killed on the battlefield as opposed to those who suffer later when they come home?
Those on the battlefield should have the purple one. Okay, yes. Those who die afterwards, but they die service connected to the affliction that they carry, like PTSD. And because of the PTSD, it morphed into something else. Like,
Oh, yeah.
let's say it morphed into something else as a result of having the PTSD, like whether it be, or they were exposed to something where they
Absolutely.
were.
Absolutely.
They were
Yeah.
exposed to
Yes.
they were exposed to something at Kashkanabad, the
Yes.
chemical the toxins over there, or
Right.
they were exposed to the burn pits and their breathing, the asthma, and and now they can't breathe and are on oxygen, and all of a sudden they were exposed to things, or they went to Camp Lejeune to get their basic training before they did whatever contingency thing they did, and then they were exposed there, and then they went somewhere else. Okay, they died from their afflictions as a result to an exposure somewhere and doing their job. Okay, so maybe they didn't die as a result of a wound, but they still are deserving, their family is deserving of a form of a gold star, and maybe
Okay.
that's
So
okay.
what? Yeah, I mean, you're arguing essentially to keep the current definition of gold star and next of kin. The gold
Right,
star, right? Okay,
because they die service connected.
service connected. Thank you, Ron. And I do want to come back and have you talk about Anthony. I do want to go to Becky Nyren, who's a gold star wife on this call. I'm curious, of course, Becky, what you think about this debate.
Well, I agree with Ron wholeheartedly. I guess I didn't know there was the distinction currently between the next of kin and Gold Star. All of the groups I've been involved with, I know Gold Star mothers who've lost their children to suicide. I know Gold Star wives who have lost their husbands to cancer from Agent Orange 40 years later. And we're all categorized as Gold Star. As a Gold Star wife who got the knock on the door because my husband was killed in Iraq, I think there should be some type of distinction. And I don't want to sound.
Becky, I'm sorry. Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
We're friends, so I feel like I could interrupt you.
Sure.
Nate, your husband, was his death considered a killed in action?
Yes.
So you received
I got the knock.
you got the knock on the door and you got this gold star.
Correct.
Okay. But the organizations you belong to and you're very active in, they are organizations, Gold Star Wives, Gold Star Families, that also include people who got this next of kin lapel button.
I guess, unbeknownst to me, I didn't I'm probably naive in admitting this, but I didn't know there were two separate pins.
Right.
I'd like to read that article because when I first met a woman whose husband died from Agent Orange, and this may be where I sound selfish because she got to spend another 40 years with him after he came home.
Yes.
And I didn't know that was categorized as Gold Star until I met her, and I totally understand. She's totally deserving of recognition, and but I just didn't, I didn't realize there was that distinction until several years ago.
Yeah, and the distinction is really only at the official level, at the Pentagon level. The organizations that you're active with, Gold Star Wives of America, American Gold Star Families, American Gold Star Mothers, they all have broad definitions of the Gold Star family. So when the families out there are very much bond together, it seems that it's really, the distinction is really mainly at the official level and at the Legion level.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Becky. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else have something to contribute or share with this discussion? Jerry, Augustine, be wonderful to hear from you, Jerry, combat veteran.
Thank you, Todd.
And
Yeah,
Bob Van Bargen.
this really rings a bell to me because I lost my son to suicide in 2014, 10 years ago, 38 years old. He was a brilliant kid, college graduate, never had a job. It shocked me when I got the phone call. But I was diagnosed with a mood disorder in 1981. I didn't know it was PTSD at the time. But the way I brought up my boys, I really think that had something on, that affected them. Not only my Agent Orange, which got into my blood, but both boys were college graduate, never had a job after college. Then throughout the years, they changed. My youngest son right now, he was born in 79. Michael never had a job, and he stays with my ex-wife, and he's in and out of the hospital suicidal. My second boy. And this program really rings a bell to me. I love to wear my pin of a gold star on my chest of my son, Mark. I never knew that existed or what it's coming up to be, but it's definitely related to my service, of course, because I was in combat for the whole year.
Yeah.
You know that.
Right.
So this is really something. Yeah.
Jerry, and that's a burden you've lived with. Thank you, Jerry. Bob
Thank you.
Von Bargen, you had your hand up?
Yes, it's my understanding that the Gold Star Mothers are a 501c3, and it's if you go to their website, the guidelines are anyone who died while in military service. I mean that's the overhanging one, and I know that in New Jersey here, as a matter of fact, last year we did a video on Gold Star Mothers, and it was an eye opener. I know that in New Jersey, amongst the mothers, there was some pressure or indecision. I don't know what the right word is. There was one mother whose son was killed in an automobile crash, and she was a super patriot, and she is a super patriot, and she felt very strongly about that her son was serving, and that she did, and there were other mothers whose sons were killed in battle, who felt the other way. I totally agree with the inclusion of the PTS. We have here in Bordentown a group that meets on PTS, and I was able to, and it's you don't go in there, you have to be vetted to get in there. And the only reason they let me in was because we were doing a video on PTS.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, these men in that meeting, this guy, Bill West, a Marine veteran, started with 8 people. He now has over 240 people of which anywhere on any Monday morning, 50 to 75 show up. And I sat and I watched that meeting. And those men are hurting. And when suicides come about, it is very definitely a result of military action. I don't see how anybody can fight that out. I mean, it is as plain as can be.
So, Bob, with your perspective that you had, your experience, do you support broadening the definition, the official definition of a Gold Star family member? Or do you think it's important to keep that distinction, those who died on the battlefield versus those who die service related or not, later or
Right
off
now,
the battlefield?
Right now, it's not battlefield. It's anyone who serves, who has lost their lives while serving in military. There's nothing said about battlefield.
Officially, yes, there is. Yes, there is. Now the Gold Star Mothers is a private organization.
Yeah.
They define it differently. But the Pentagon, to get the Gold Star pin,
Oh, okay.
you
Okay.
have to
Yeah,
have
we got
died.
apples and oranges here. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, it is an apples and oranges distinction. I'm looking right now at the definition at the Gold Star Mothers website, and it says, yeah, anybody whose son or daughter became missing in action, died while on active duty, or died as a result of service are eligible for membership in the American Gold Star Mothers Incorporated.
Yeah.
So you don't have to have died in combat. Okay.
I'm in favor of broadening it.
Broadening it. Thank you, Bob. Mark Spirdigliosi, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Todd. Very interesting subject that you bring up here tonight. And I guess I'm just a little confused. I know of the Gold Star pin, but tonight is the first that I've heard of the next of kin Gold
Yes.
Star. And Becky, would you not be available or able to wear both because your husband was your next of kin? And that's one area that I'm confused at. The second thing is trying to draw a line as to where that ends. I mean, the definition of a Gold Star family, trying to draw that line is going to be like trying to herd cats. I mean, I think that, you could say that people that died of old age, may have been affected, their life shortened by service or something like that. So I mean, that would really be a hard definition to get to. But my question to Becky is are you or are you not entitled to wear both the Gold Star pin and the next of kin pin? And what is the difference, I guess?
Mark, I can't answer that. That's because I'm like you. I don't think I was aware there was a next of kin pin, but
Okay.
my understanding is, as Todd explained it so well, is the purple and gold star is for those of us whose loved one was killed as a direct result of combat or during battle, where the next of kin lapel button, the gold one, is for those who later died as a result of their service, as in chemicals from Vietnam, suicide, that type of thing, if I'm understanding that correctly. So I think there is a distinction in the two pins. So one is for direct battle, the other one is indirect battle.
And again, these are the official congressionally recognized Pentagon distinctions. These are not distinctions that are recognized by private organizations like the American Gold Star Mothers, or American Gold Star Wives. The pin on the left, Gold Star lapel button for those family members of those killed in action. The button on the right next to kin lapel button, created 30 years later, for those who died on active duty, but not combat related. There's nothing.
Duty.
Active duty. You have to be in uniform. You died in a car accident, of suicide, of an illness. You died somehow. There's nothing, no official recognition for those who die later of illness or suicide after they're out of uniform, after their active duty is over. All that recognition, all that bonding, and all that community and support comes from private organizations. The Pentagon does not recognize that. And I should add one more thing. if you, and again, this is very tough, but I think it's important to be direct and specific about it. And this is just from what I've read. Let's say you're serving in Iraq and your husband is killed by an IED. You get the same benefits as if your husband drank bad water and died of cholera. The same, there's no distinction in the benefits, that the insurance that you get, any of the benefits that you get. The only distinction is this cultural distinction of what lapel button you wear. And that cultural distinction means so much to some people. Carol Popchak. Oh, Jim Roberts. Good. And then Carol, I want you to unmute and explain what you put here in the chat, because I think it's an interesting point. How are you, Jim?
Good. I have to agree with the previous statement about how do you draw the line. I mean, if you go back through the military, the CIB, the Combat Infantry Badge, has different requirements at different levels of service.
Yes.
The Purple Heart. When I was in Vietnam, a Purple Heart required you being seen by an MO, and you had to go by medevac. There are a lot of GIs who took a wound to the calf or the arm, who got patched up by the medic and went right back into battle, and there's no Purple Heart because they were never seen by one of the problems with the CIB was high-level officers flying in on a helicopter and flying out claiming a CIB. When I was there, you had to have 30 days in the combat zone and 30 minutes of direct contact. And it had to be small arms contact. Being mortared didn't count. So I think no matter what the award is, when you got these kind of things, there's no easy way to delineate that. And depending on which side of the award you're on, you've got a decent argument.
The distinctions, however, Jim, you're implying are important.
Yes, they are. They are. And, as far as that, everyone on my team got nicked up, but no one got a Purple Heart because nothing that serious. I don't want a Purple Heart, because there are guys with much more serious hits than I took that don't have them. And so, but it's a problem for the military. And, how do you differentiate these things that are not hardcore black and white?
Yeah.
There are a lot of soldiers deserve medals of honor. How did they pick the ones who got them? It'd be at the right place at the right time with the right superior officer. I don't see how you solve this problem. It's a horrible Gordian knot.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough one. All right. And it is related, I think, to that combat issue, the issue of recognitions of combat veterans versus other veterans. Bill Confer, how are you?
Okay, Todd. How are you?
Good.
Well, I just think that I agree with several of the speakers. I think it ought to be a special award for those people that died in combat. I mean, it's for the families. When I go to an event, I try to search out the Gold Star mothers and fathers and the family members and try to talk to them. I think it's an important distinction that they died in a combat zone. And I think that they ought to recognize these other people that either have PTSD or something like that. But I don't really think or agree with the fact that they ought to be Gold Star families. I don't know. I don't know how that would go, but it's certainly a good discussion.
It is
bringing it up.
Thank you, Bill. I think it's an important discussion. I really do, and I think it's related. It's analogous, not related. It's analogous to a discussion that I had with a few veterans recently about a Mark Leipson essay in which he complained, and I want to invite Mark on. I've corresponded with him before. He complained about the distinction between combat veterans, maybe, as Jim said, those who wear the CIB, the Combat Infantry Badge, and non-combat veterans, those who say served in Vietnam, but they worked in the rear echelon. Mark is offended by that distinction. He thinks his service, he served as a clerk in an air-conditioned office, is slighted because he's not recognized as a combat veteran. I think I would like to discuss this maybe the next open conversation, because so many of you served in combat and many of you didn't. And I'm curious to hear how you feel about that distinction. So I put the Mark Leapson essay from HistoryNet here in the chat on the Zoom side, if you want to look it up. Do we have any, before we move on, do we have anybody else want to weigh in on this
You
difficult
mentioned
issue?
Carol.
Yeah. Oh, Carol. Yes. Carol Popchalk, you had there, hold on. Unmute there, Carol.
Okay, there we go.
How are you, Carol?
I'm pretty well.
Good.
This is a very difficult discussion. My grandmother was a Gold Star mother. She lost her oldest son in combat in World War II. Her sister was a Gold Star mother who lost her only son, the pilot, my cousin, in World War II. And I actually met a Gold Star mother group in my college years. They had a convention of some sort in my college town, and they needed a parliamentarian. And my department came around and said, "Hey, does anybody know Robert's Rules of Parliamentary Procedure?" And I did. So I spent the better part of a week with a whole host of Gold Star mothers when I was still in college. I have always thought that the purpose of that designation was to honor the family's sacrifice. So I would hope that whatever final decisions are made, they also look at it from the point of view of the families. It's not just what did your kid do in the war, or it's not the specific task or job from my point of view, but what comfort are they, or what honor are they trying to show the families who made sacrifices? I think that would tend to broaden the definition a little bit. Yeah. I am in no position to say how broad that should be, what all it should include, but I'd just like to see them remember this is about comforting or giving some kind of special honor and comfort to the families, because the soldiers themselves get decorations, get awards, get recognition for their contributions in combat. This is how to recognize what families contribute to the war efforts.
Yeah, and boy, do families contribute. Mm-hmm. Whether people are harmed in combat or not, the Blue Star families, boy, what they endure, what they live with. This is a wonderful. Thank you for participating in this conversation, in this subject. I do think it's a rich one, and it's a one that gets at the sacrifices that families make, and that military families make when loved ones are in the service. Bill Comfort, you still have your hand up. I'm not sure if you put it up again and have something else to say.
Yeah, I did actually, Todd.
Okay.
I wanted to talk to one other thing that was mentioned. Jim Roberts mentioned, I thought he mentioned a gentleman that somebody got shot and sent right back out to the field and didn't get a Purple Heart. Is that right, Jim? Because I think that person should have gotten a Purple Heart, and just about anybody can write up a DA form 638 and put it in on somebody, and somebody should have done that for that guy.
Oh, yes.
I can't speak about all of Vietnam. I just know in my province, yeah. You needed to be seen by a medical officer in MO. If you weren't nicked sufficiently enough to get on a medevac to be sent out and dispatched by a medic, there's no paperwork. There's absolutely nothing in your record that shows you were wounded. You might have a scar, but I mean, I've got scars from things that had nothing to do with combat. Yeah. And so I mean, that's just the way it was. And there were a lot of GIs, a lot of Marines, who caught things that didn't keep them out of the battle, and they were patched up by the medic and sent back. And there's you can file the forms you want, but you got to have something in the documentation that says you were treated and wounded, and it's not there.
Oh, I never heard of that. But
well, just on that note, one last thing, but it will take way too much discussion. My husband didn't get a Purple Heart either, and he was killed. So it just depends, I guess.
Becky, that's wrong.
No, the Army classified it as non-combat related. How that happened? He was in uniform in a Humvee going to the FOB, and he was killed. So, but I went to Washington and they denied it a second time. So if anybody else has any words of wisdom on that, let me know.
That, Becky, that seems like a contradiction that you would get a Gold Star pin and that he would be denied a Purple Heart. I mean,
yeah, they classified it non-combat. So I don't know if it was because he died at the hands of a civilian or what, but that's.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
They're saying that the driver of the car that blew
Yeah.
up or hit his car,
Mhm.
a suicide attack,
Yeah, whatever.
was a non-combatant.
They couldn't give me specifics, but that was.
Oh my gosh. Man, is this the fog of war?
Yeah.
All right, Bob Flage.
Yes, sir. I have a personal feeling that the combat deaths should be only on our wall. We've got a couple that were domestic killings, and I understand the families want somebody to be memorized, but the fact is, I personally know about 5 guys that are on that wall, and that means a lot to me. These people that just know their relative and they want them on the wall. I don't think it means that much about all the other people that are on the wall.
Yeah.
That's the reason I feel like, it should be the combat deaths that, because those are the ones that were the brothers that, served together, and basically some of them died together.
Yeah.
Jacksonville does have a plan. I don't know where it is at this point, but they were talking about establishing a memorial, a kiosk that they could bring up faces and information for what they call the wounds of war. And those people would, the PSD type of after effect type would end up on that wall. And I agree with that. But like I said, to make a family happy, especially one, our wall originally was designated for just Jacksonville residents. But, one example, a guy, grew up in another county in Florida, and, he was really, he wasn't the home of record of Jacksonville. He was from Massachusetts, and that's where he's buried now. But it wasn't a combat death, that and even on active duty that got this guy on the wall. And I don't think you should be there.
And it's interesting. I just launched a poll of Gold Star families, and this room is about split. About 56% are in favor of keeping the distinction the way it is, and 44% want to broaden the definition. So I don't think we solved anything, but we certainly did cover some ground. I want to move on. Ron Giunta, you lost your son, Anthony, recently. Unexpected. Anthony, like you, served in the Air Force National Guard. Here's his picture. Was his death at all service related, Ron?
The coroner, my wife and I found him sleeping. He was peacefully sleeping in bed when we found him. He was dead. That was 2 weeks ago yesterday. And when the coroner came and took his body downtown, they had him for 2 days, and they've sent samples of his body out for toxology, and the determination of death has not been made yet.
Okay.
Now, I have my own thoughts. Okay. He suffered tremendously from PTSD. He drank a lot from 2010 all the way up to, and except for a time period, he was living with us for 14 months because he had to, because the building he lived in had a fire, and he lived in our house for 14 months and he was dry. But in the meantime, also, I think basically that he had trouble with alcohol, and he suffered immensely from PTSD. And he just had a way of telling everybody he was feeling great when he wasn't. And I could see through it. I suffer from PTSD myself, and I tell my doctors the truth. And I've talked to a lot of veterans and helped a lot of veterans. Todd, you know that. And personally, I believe he died service connected, but I can't say that to my wife and I can't say it to anybody else. It's just, but in my heart, I know that had he not experienced what he experienced on his 3 tours of duty in Iraq, Kashkanabad, and over in Qatar and Afghanistan, if he hadn't experienced what he experienced, maybe he might be with us today. You know, plus his whole life became a wreck after he came back. That's a picture of him in K2, his first tour. That was 2002. Just a young guy, 20 years old. You know, that was before his first semester at Penn State. You know, he just graduated from meteorology school from the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
And he had such a promising life in front of him. But, and he volunteered to go to Iraqi Freedom in 2006 after he got his bachelor's degree in meteorology. And he got married, but after the first year, his whole life fell apart as a result. And it was hard for him to file a claim for PTSD. This is my retirement ceremony, and him and I are standing side by side together. You can see the difference between the previous picture and this one, how he gained weight. And well, that's a result of his lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know, I tried to help him as much as I could. That's my retirement in the Pentagon. And I gave him a coin holder. He wanted a big coin holder for a gift. Well, I got him the biggest one they had. You know, and he was so happy to get that. And that's my daughter right behind him with her head turned, you know.
Yeah.
You know, but that's a picture of him in his Class A's. And that's the way he looked in his casket, because he lost a lot of weight and his uniform fit him. That's my wife sitting next to him to his right, and my daughter on his left during my ceremony. A picture of, and my son-in-law next to him. That's Anthony and I together. We were putting flags at veterans' graves over here, St. James and Sewickley, and he helped us plant flags in veterans' graves, not this past Memorial Day, but the previous one. He wanted to get involved and help put flags in veterans' graves. But whenever we made arrangements for the funeral, I called Air Force Casualty Affairs in Washington, D.C., and they told me that for Friday the 26th, they had a lot of funerals, and they would contact the Air Force Reserve. And after about 3 days, nobody was calling me, and I contacted DC again. Only I'm instead just saying Ron Gianta, Colonel retired. I said, this is Colonel Gianta. I'm trying to find out what the arrangements are for my son's funeral. He wanted military pallbearers. So they got a hold of 9/11, who wasn't, every time I called, their voicemail was full. And finally somebody called back and says, well, we're so busy, all we have is 2 guys to fold the flag and play a recording of taps. And I sent you the email. Well, you got a hold of Butch with the Vietnam veterans out of Baldwin. And somebody called me from there, and then I called Butch, and he called me after completing a memorial service in Mount Washington on Thursday night. And he said, we will be at the cemetery waiting for you. Now, there were 2 guys from the Air Force Reserve to fold the flag. The cemetery workers had to function and double out as pallbearers for Anthony to help the funeral director. But when we got there, there was a bagpiper that started playing bagpipes as soon as they started taking Anthony's casket out of the hearse. And it just blew everybody's mind and sent shrills through everybody's spine. And then they took him up to the chapel and wheeled him to the chapel. And there was a full Vietnam veteran Army, full Vietnam veteran honor guard inside the chapel. And there was a rifle guard outside the chapel. And okay, the priest comes in and he says his final prayers in Latin, because that was what Anthony liked, and in English, and gave the final blessing. And the Air Force came in and they folded the flag, presented it to me, and the Vietnam veterans played taps, and then they fired the volley. And then as we were leaving the chapel, the priest wanted to bless the ground where Anthony was going to go. And the bagpiper played Amazing Grace on bagpipes. The Vietnam veteran bagpiper plays Amazing Grace on bagpipes. When that bagpiper was done, that bagpiper played the Air Force song on bagpipes. You could have watered the grass at Christ the Redeemer Cemetery with the tears that were flowing and people just holding their hearts. So we gave him a thank you to the Baldwin Borough Vietnam veterans who came through and gave Anthony a send-off that was just totally awesome. And it made me proud to be a veteran. And thank you for what you did to get a hold of these guys and round them up to help me, because it put my heart at rest in being able to give my son a proper military burial.
To me, it exemplified what the Vietnam generation means to the veterans community. Vietnam Veterans Incorporated is a local Pittsburgh organization that's been around for about 40 years. They are headquartered here in the South Hills of Pittsburgh. They have an honor guard. And as many of you know, there are fewer and fewer honor guards out there. And people don't consider how important honor guards are unless it's Memorial Day and they need one for a ceremony that they want to have, or a family member passes away and now they need an honor guard, and they're few and far between. There aren't many. I don't know who's going to do these honor guard duties when the Vietnam generation passes away, because there's so many honor guard that are made up of Vietnam veterans. Clem Blazewick, who I think might be here in the Zoom tonight, he's a member of Vietnam Veterans Incorporated, immediately got in contact with other members of the honor guard, and they leapt into action. And I'm just so grateful to them, and so in awe of their willingness and ability to drop everything and meet the needs of military families. Ron, thank you for coming on and talking a little bit about your son. Mark Spirdigliozzi.
Todd, there is hope that the younger generation coming up behind us is better. I belong to the Red Rose Honor Guard here in Lancaster, and we are seeing a lot of OEF, Iraqi Freedom, Afghanistan vets that are joining in to our group. We have a group of about 90 of us here that do services that every person in Lancaster County, that every military person gets a full military honors, to include flag pulling. But I'm glad to say that there are some younger people that are stepping up and doing that.
That's good to know. That's very good to know. Yeah, you're part of are you part of the Red Rose Honor Guard?
Yes.
Lancaster. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Ron. Thanks for sharing the information about Anthony. And you have our sympathies, as you know.
Thank you. You know, even out here in Ohio Township and going to work, everybody was so busy with funerals that day, but somehow Butch just made it happen. And he asked me if I would come out to one of their breakfasts when you go out there. So I'm going to try to get out to see one of their breakfasts.
Good. Yes, they meet every Thursday morning at Gianna Villa's in Baldwin Whitehall.
You know, and I want to give him one of my retired Air Force coins.
Good.
As a token of thanks. Because I don't know what else to do. I'd just give him one of my coins as a retired colonel and tell him thank you.
Absolutely. They will love to have you. They are a wonderful bunch. I want to welcome Alex Sebi. You've been with us. And is that how you pronounce your last name, Sebi?
Yeah, Sebi.
Sebi, you're a Marine, correct?
I was active duty for 4 years.
Yeah, I think that we could call that a Marine. You have a wonderful project going on that I want to share with people. And it's called wordsofveterans.com. You can go to wordsofveterans.com and see it right here. You want to encourage veterans to share their stories, which is something, of course, that we do here at the Veterans Breakfast Club. You have contacted us a while back. Let us know about this ongoing project that you have. I do want to encourage people to visit it. Sean, if you could put, and I'm sure Alex, you will too, put the link here in the chat. I want you to talk about that. I also wanted you to talk about your own service and your brother's service. This is your brother, Andrew. He had traumatic brain injury. You shared a YouTube video with me that I want to play, and I thought then you could talk about your relationship with your brother, who's an Air Force veteran, correct?
He's an Air Force cadet. He did 10 years and is 100% TBI,
Okay.
disabled.
Okay. So I'm going to share, boy, this new layout here, share sound, optimize for video. I'm going to share the,
So this was Memorial Day of this year. So this is fairly recent, just to give context.
okay, here we go.
I know there.
Say again?
I worked at the National Guard. I know there. Did you like it?
You know today's Memorial Day?
Yes.
What does Memorial Day do to you?
Rick Broom.
Who's Rick Broom?
My painter.
Okay.
And he's nice.
What about Rosalind Schulte?
She's dead.
Who is Rosalind Schulte?
A good friend.
From the Air Force Academy?
Yes. It's sad she is dead.
She was in Iraq, right?
Yeah, Afghanistan.
Afghanistan?
Yeah.
What was she doing in Afghanistan?
Intelligence.
For the Air Force?
Yes.
Because she was at the Air Force Academy with you, right?
Yes, she was.
What do you want people to remember about Rosalind Schulte?
She's a great soldier.
Why?
What?
Why?
She never backed down. She never backed down.
Back down from what?
Anything.
She was brave?
Yes, very brave. It's a shame.
Why?
She died too young.
How old is she?
39. And I'm turning 40.
Yeah.
I am. I miss Rosalind Schulte. A lot.
Did you meet Rosalind Schulte at the Air Force Academy?
Yeah.
Did she graduate at the same time as you?
Yes, she did.
She did?
She graduated ahead of me.
Huh?
She graduated ahead of me. Ahead of me.
Ahead of you?
Yes, she did. You maxed out my city.
Huh?
I maxed out my city.
Yeah.
I did. 1,800.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, because you were you were in satellites, right?
Oh yeah. National Reserves.
What'd you do for satellites?
National Reserves. I looked up in space and saw where they were. And marked them there.
You did that for the Air Force?
Yes, I did.
You also flew planes too, right?
Yes, that's right.
F-35?
Yeah. Damn thing never works.
On what?
Damn thing never works. It doesn't.
Yeah. How long were you in the Air Force?
10 years.
What service was I in?
Marine Corps.
There we go. Anything you want to say to your daughter?
Alice, I love you. I do. She's cute.
It's cute.
Dangerously cute.
I'm going to send this to her.
Okay.
Look at the camera and tell Alice you love her.
I love you, Alice. I do. I do. Say Bengal tigers.
Huh?
Bengal tigers.
What about them?
I just saw one. In India.
Wow. Good job, Max.
Okay, well, that was, it was very difficult to understand what Andrew was saying and even what you were saying. But I think that was part of the point.
This is the little secret of adult
Well,
film.
oh my gosh. Well, that broke the
Yeah,
mood.
so I took that video for Memorial Day. It's common for people to share photos of people that passed away that they knew during war. So I took the video, but I don't share that video publicly. It's actually on my personal YouTube. There's actually a lot of challenges with showing imagery and video of people that have severe disabilities and other medical problems. But I think that imagery is it should actually be accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like there's very few museums that actually show the realities of injuries in war. There's one actually in Maryland, the Confederate Medical Museum.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. But most of the museums, you don't really see the realities of what people experience. So this particular conversation is really a difficult one for a lot of reasons, in my view. From my own experience, when I went to the Library of Congress, I actually had thought that I was a Gold Star family member. I didn't know that there was a distinction between someone that actually died in the battlefield and that someone that, that survived or has survived. So I did actually contact a bunch of non-for-profits like the Gold Star Family Members of America. And so because my brother's not dead, I'm not classified as anything, is my experience. And I guess this is comparable to the Vietnam veterans that, their family members that had Agent Orange or cancer. But like with the TBI, like they're not functioning at all. So like, and my brother probably will live for a long time.
Alex, can I interrupt you and ask you, what's the age difference between you and your brother? Is he younger? Is he older?
3 years.
Older?
Younger.
He's your younger brother. Did you join the Marine Corps first?
Yes.
Okay. And did you recommend that he join the Air Force? Did he make that decision on his own?
So my grandfather was a World War II veteran. My dad was a Vietnam veteran. So it's just in our family's tradition to be in the military.
Yeah. And that's very common. I mean, that's common for the biggest determinant of somebody joining the military is whether they have a close family member who served in the military. Could you tell us about the nature of his wound? How did he get TBI? How was he wounded?
Yeah. So again, I don't want to make any distinctions. I just, the only thing I would like is I would like there to be a family survivor award. So that everybody that's a family member who has a family member that passes away in combat or from Agent Orange or from TBI, I think they should get some recognition. And I think a survivor award would do that. So my brother, because he was a Air Force cadet with a top secret clearance working in satellites and on planes, his paperwork doesn't indicate a lot of what he did. I know he went to Japan. I know he went to Turkey, but he did that during the Air Force Academy, and there's no paperwork. It's not on his DD-214. My own experience is no, I did not actually go to Iraq. I was stop lost, and I was trained or prepared to go. But they released a stop loss a month before my EAS was, so I didn't go. You can imagine how how that's perceived by a lot of people that that did go. What I will say is,
I want to ask you, how is that perceived by other people?
It's taken me 20 years to actually be willing to have that discussion because of it being negatively perceived.
So why? It's not your choice.
It's just not perceived as of similar service, in my estimation of it.
Well, it's not similar, but it's service. I mean, it's
I just try not to make these these comparisons. So what I will say also though about my service was that I was stationed at Yuma, Arizona, Marine Corps Air Station Yuma, Arizona, which is 10 minutes from the Mexico border. At 18 years old, I was in the desert photographing dead bodies that died of dehydration and blown up in the desert.
Right.
So like I've seen a lot of people dead.
Yeah. Alex, I'm going to interrupt you here and just say one of the most moving programs that we've had with the Veterans Breakfast Club this year was with those who served in Graves registration in Vietnam. And that's a non-combat role. It's actually a clerical role. And they were in supply. Technically, they were in the supply business, but it just happens to be that they were collecting and cleaning and sorting the bodies and personal effects of those who were killed. There was not a combat veteran in this Zoom room talking with these veterans who served in Graves registration who would have traded places with them.
I was in a bombing field that had live ordnance that people got blown up from metal scrapping. Like I can't tell me that wasn't a dangerous environment.
That's it. Nobody. There's not a single person who would take that job in Graves registration. It's
at 18 years old.
At 18 years old, what they were exposed to. Alex, let me ask you: is your service obviously is connected to this wonderful project that you have, which is Words of Veterans, where you're encouraging veterans to share their stories? And I know that you've contacted and contacted and interviewed and worked with lots of veterans. People go to wordsofveterans.com. Tell us about this project.
So just really one small thing also before we go there. So if you did listen to my brother's story, he was talking about friends that died, during Afghanistan. So he wasn't deployed there, but like those are still really relevant memories for him. So to say that those injuries aren't combat related, I have a hard time with that justification also. But so this is my website, wordsofveterans.com. This is a 2-year project for me. So basically, this is what I've been doing with my life. I also work. I actually work at Quantico Marine Corps Base. I don't want to say too much about that, but so I do have proper employment. But this is my hobby project. And about 5 years ago, my brother basically vomited and asphyxiated his brain and was in hospice for a few months, and he came back and forth to life, and we didn't think he was going to survive. So I went to the Library of Congress, to the Veteran History Project. I don't know if anyone else is familiar with it, but it's the longest oral history of the U.S. military. It's 20 years running, and it's applicable to any veteran from World War I to the present day, whether they did or did not go to combat. Interestingly enough, there's one other historical oral history called the Pension Project during the Revolutionary War. So there's been 2 of these. Now, I went and did this, and the questions, there's about 50 questions that they have veterans answer. And those questions are remarkably well researched and put together. Whoever made those 50 questions, in my estimation, really, really knew what they were doing. It's probably one of the most significant parts of U.S. military history that I'm aware of. So problem with it is that like you possibly have to go to the Library of Congress in DC to do it, or to even know it exists. It is free, but like going to DC, the parking and the food and all that's not free. And then I guess they do have volunteers that go to different veteran organizations to do this for the veteran community, but they don't have media backgrounds, and I haven't been able to find one, to be quite honest. So I've made these questions accessible on a website that's totally private and secure. It also uses a microphone, so if you are missing arms or in a hospital bed, if you can't write, if you don't want to write, you can just basically dictate it. And then at the completion of it, you have the ability to PDF or email whoever you want to the results. There's also two other aspects that I'm adding to it. One is a print on demand function feature that prints a hardcover book that you can share with your family members. It's kind of like a challenge coin or like a shadow box.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure why nobody's done this before, but it's actually really quite interesting service. And then I'm also offering a blog publishing service. So if someone does want to say something that uses their answers to those 50 questions, this is a way for someone in the U.S. military to actually be published, and it uses new technology. So my website is 20 years ahead of government websites. Yeah, I've been doing this.
Yeah, that's and Al Smith had just asked, does Alex know about the Library of Congress project? Yeah, so all of the interviews that you've done, that you will send them to the Library of Congress Veterans History Project?
Possible. So I'm not there yet.
Veterans could choose.
Currently, I see this as a precursor to doing this at the Library of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest anybody that does this should do it at least, at home over a period of a few months privately with their family to talk about what they do or they don't want to be released permanently on a federal website. You can use my website if you want to, or you can do it by pen and paper. You can actually download the questions from the Library of Congress's website. Mine does have a lot of other advanced features. Again, there's actually non-for-profits that provide grants for different organizations to reinterpret the public domain information of the Library of Congress. There isn't one for veterans, but there is for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically have just done that for the veteran community because I saw this as a significant aspect of U.S. military history. And for me, it was very therapeutic and cathartic to do this for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I actually wrote a 30,000 word book independently from the results of those 50 questions.
From those 50 questions. So people can see the 50 questions on your website.
Correct.
Okay. So I do encourage people to go to wordsofveterans.com, visit the website. You can see those 50 questions that prompt a veteran to share his or her story. Ron Giunta, you had your hand up.
Thank you.
Alex.
Yeah.
Okay, my name is Ron Giunta. Okay,
Yes,
I'm
sir.
retired Air Force. I spent 14 years between the Air National Guard and the Air Force as a mortuary affairs officer. Okay, so one, I want to say thank you for your service. Number two, I can really empathize with the job that you had to do, and it takes a lot of guts and bravery to do the job that you had to do when you were doing your photography. Okay, down there in the desert. But if you ever want somebody to talk to, if you ever need somebody to talk to in regards to what you went through in the past or anything, you can always reach me through Todd by sending Todd an email, and he'll get a hold of me and we can connect if you ever need any help with anything or whatever, because I can really understand and I really empathize with what you had to go through in your military service, and that I'm here to help.
Thank you,
And
sir.
Alex, you should know that Ron is a veteran in the know. He really is. He's the person I turn to when veterans have questions about connecting to services or resources or benefits. So absolutely, he's a great resource.
I'm a retired VBA employee, and I used to help veterans do their claims.
Okay, I'll message you for your email if you don't mind.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Alex.
Thanks for your service too.
Thank you.
Dave Seaver.
So being on the medical side, I saw a lot of that stuff. A few years ago, I was asked to do a presentation for I'm trying to remember the name of the organization. It's Southwest Pennsylvania Organization of Nurse Leaders. Okay. And they wanted me to do it on PTSD. So I actually did that, but along the way in doing my research for doing this project, I discovered a little bit about another phenomenon, if you want to call it that, out there, called secondary trauma stress disorder. So, and here's, PTSD, you've been in combat, you've witnessed bad things. But, for me, it was, how many times can you see people with their arms and legs and eyes gone before it starts to get to you. So it's the secondary. You don't see the actual trauma, but you see enough trauma that it's the secondary effect that has on you. I actually found that, I'll try to send that to you, Todd. I found the PowerPoint that I did, but ironically, because I'm doing some stuff for the VA for my disability stuff, I have letters that I wrote home to my wife. And just to prove that point, so we got in country in February. You know, this is 2010. We're in Afghanistan during the surge. And so I wrote February 8th is the date on this. So we got in country January 1st. Here it is a month and a week later. And I'll just read you a line from the second letter. We are seeing some bad things, and we'll see even more as time goes on. We need to help each other and ask for help when it is getting to us. I recall one of my troops saying, and I quote, I'm quoting here, "This shit fucks with my head."
Boy, oh boy. I'm glad you kept those letters, or your wife kept those letters.
Yeah.
Those are important artifacts, not only to you, but to us, to the rest of us. They give us a little glimpse.
Yeah, I also have a personal journal that I was handwriting. That lasted about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Before we got so busy and we were already just so exhausted 3 weeks in, I just stopped.
You couldn't do it anymore. Oh boy. I do want to take a break and just remind people this is the Veterans Breakfast Club. We do these events on Monday nights at 7 p.m., Thursday nights at 7 p.m. And on Thursday night, we have a World War II open conversation. It's an open conversation just like we're having tonight, but it's going to be focused on all things World War II. I'll be there. Glenn Flickinger, our wonderful host of our Greatest Generation Live, will be there. And we'll be fielding topics and questions and subjects just like we're doing tonight. We'll also bring a few of our own because this is an important date in 1945, 79th anniversary of right in between there, the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the right on the cusp of the Japanese surrender, ending World War II. So we'll be talking about those things and anything else you want to discuss. That's Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, August 8th. I do want to let people know also we're going to do a World War II Jeopardy. Glenn and I think Ray Brendel will be putting our heads together, coming up with some questions and having another one of our Jeopardy nights focused on World War II. This will be Thursday, August 29th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Our magazine, for the first time, we focused everything in our magazine on our summer issue on World War II, specifically the air war. Ed Cottrell's story is in there, and Ed has joined us here in the Zoom room tonight. We send this out to about 10,000 households. If you did not get this in the mail yet, it's because we have your wrong address or we don't have your address at all. So let us know what your address is. We'll be happy to put one in the mail. These are free of charge. And we also send out, I should say I mean Jim Jameson, the wonderful, hardworking Jim Jameson, who's on here in the Zoom room. He does this work behind the scenes. He doesn't ask for any public thanks. But I do want to embarrass him to thank him for sending out thousands upon thousands of these magazines every season. He sends them all around the country to people who then distribute these magazines. And then we get new people coming into the Zoom room and writing and joining our community here. So thank you, Jim Jameson, for the hard work you do sending these magazines out. If you would like to receive a box of 20 or 25 or 100, let us know and we'd be happy to send it to you. We have Tobacco Free Adagio Health as our sponsor of this program. They've been sponsoring us for quite some time. They create healthier places to live, work, and play. They advocate for people for healthier places to live, work, and play. They assist people in quitting smoking, and they educate the public about the hazards of tobacco use. You could find out more about what they do at tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org. We also have the ever active UPMC for Life as a sponsor of this program. You can go to their website, upmchealthplan.com/Medicare, and specifically learn about the program, the special program that they have, the Medicare Advantage plan that they have for veterans who are on TRICARE for life. UPMC for Life is a big supporter of the Veterans Breakfast Club, in-person events, our online events, our magazine. We couldn't do it without them, and we're very grateful to them. We're also grateful to you for joining our programs, whether you watch on Facebook or YouTube or here in the Zoom room. We're grateful to all of you who go to veteransbreakfastclub.org. They become members, they make donations, they keep this community alive and going. We depend heavily on your recommendations, on letting us know what works for you, what doesn't work, what we could do better. We have a survey that takes 2.5 minutes to complete, where people could let us know how we did with this particular program tonight, how we could improve, what worked, what didn't work, and any suggestions for future programs. I will put the link here in the chat so you could access it. It takes 2.5 minutes. That's all it takes. Ron, again, how are you, Ron?
Okay. Hey, look, just one final announcement. We've been talking all night about veterans needing help and stuff. Okay. I've been involved in a program called PGA Hope. I put it in the chat with the website and their phone number, Tri-State PGA Hope. They provide free golf lessons for veterans, and it gets veterans together, teaching them how to play golf. I've seen veterans in wheelchairs playing golf. They teach them adaptive golf, introducing veterans to the game of golf. If you don't have clubs, they'll provide clubs for you. I've been working with them now for the last year and a half. I'm proud to say that I applied and I was selected to be an ambassador to the PGA Hope program. And I'll be going to Bethesda, Maryland for training in October. But this is a program where they go out and they help veterans learn how to play golf, but it also helps veterans who have issues associated with other veterans, and it's for free. And there's the website, there's their phone number, it's in your chat box. And if nobody ever played golf before or they haven't played in years, I'm telling you, these people are good, and it's taught by PGA professionals. With my new knee, they taught me how to play golf all over again. They're great.
Thank you, our veteran in the know, Ron Gianta. I do, last but not least for our program, I do want to go to Mark Burnett. Mark, thank you so much for hanging in here this evening and being part of this conversation. You sent me an interesting email. You were born and raised at Camp Lejeune, presumably in the 1950s, 1960s?
Yeah, in the 1950s, as my father puts it, I was conceived there also. So
that's overshare, Dad.
Yeah, but you know.
And which means, of course, that you drank the water at Camp Lejeune. That water was contaminated. Thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of others, of Marines and family members also drank that water. You have taken it upon yourself to create a database of all the people that you could find who served at Camp Lejeune during those critical years when the water was contaminated. You've made this free and accessible and are encouraging people to file a claim. Could you remind us about this claim?
Sure. Well, and to back up a little bit, my dad was Master Sergeant, and he came into Camp Lejeune, and he was there in 57 and 58. My mom became pregnant, and actually I was born in October of 1958. She was quite sick in her second and third trimester. They called it toxemia at the time, which was a kind of a catch-all term. And of course, we didn't know anything about the water or anything like that. She had a difficult birth with me. And back then, breastfeeding was not very common. So, you know, they feed you out of a bottle and get the water out of the bottle and put in some Carol syrup and, you know, make you have diabetes later. And so I drank that. And then we stayed there for a number of years. There's pictures of me on Onslow Beach. There's pictures of me in the housing and things like that. And so I continued to drink the water that was contaminated. It actually was contaminated with 5 different types of chemicals they found out later that the government finally discovered. I didn't really know about a lot of these because that went all the way to 85 to 87. You know, I'm in the 50s. I started having problems. I started having issues, but I just didn't know what it was. And some of those issues were kind of severe. And eventually I developed Parkinson's disease. And with Parkinson's, when doctors looked backwards, they said, oh, well, there's a 70% higher amount of people getting Parkinson's in Camp Lejeune than compared to Camp Pendleton, is what they compared it to. So that's pretty high. And we know that TCE, which is the chemical that was one of the chemicals in the water, is actually 500 times more potent in causing Parkinson's. So unfortunately, I don't have a good prognosis going forward. But my main point in coming on the show was that I spent 6 months trying to find more data about, well, what happened there? What was going on? Because all they were doing was saying, yeah, we interviewed some soldiers, we interviewed, some Marines and Navy, and, we got the numbers and everything like this. And then the actual Congress passed the bill, which Biden signed, to allow all those soldiers and civilians and people born there to sue the government if the government did not reach any sort of agreement with people. So here's where we're at. 330,000 people have filed so far. It is estimated that 700,000 people that were there at Camp Lejeune have not. They have until Friday. So of this week. So they need to move, and you need to jump them. And if you were there for 30 days, and this is really important, 30 days non-consecutive, it doesn't matter. You do not have to be there every day. You can go there. Unfortunately, in the paper, when I studied it and I started doing research, the Girl Scouts went there and were at the pool for 10-week training. Red Cross was there. There were civilians cleaning uniforms. The list goes on and on. You're talking about a base that's 251 square miles in size. There was some disgusting things going on when I read that paper, and I indexed everything that the government didn't do, which I'll get to. But one of the things that you said earlier was that you guys were talking about one of the worst meals you ate, I think, in the mess hall or something like that. This may be the worst. The steam plant that made steam for the base produced 200,000 pounds of steam every single hour. Most of that went through 51 miles of pipe that went to heat things. However, it also steamed the vegetables, the potatoes, and everything. And that was documented by a video and in text from the person who ran the steam plant. So the government is arguing you have to drink out of the faucet to be contaminated. And what's really happening here is that there probably was no place not to go that you couldn't get contaminated. I have a nice real coffee cup from Camp Lejeune. And it's not my dad's, but it's one that I got. And it had those nice stains in the bottom. My wife cleaned it, unfortunately. But it's not something I drink out of now. Because those chemicals were in there. People drank coffee all the time. Camp Lejeune gave away free coffee. That was a very common thing for them to do. They had, they produced ice at a huge volume. There were 400 tons of ice in storage at Camp Lejeune, and they produced 20 to 30 tons of ice every 20 hours. And this was for drinks at the NCO club. This was for the beach. This was for the hospital to ice down patients. The volume is enormous of that contaminated water. It went through many wells. It was all over the place. And what I discovered in the paper by going through it is finding all those connections. One thing I'm really good at is building databases. I've built databases for the Pentagon, the International Monetary Fund, Charles Schwab. I've done a lot of big stuff. So to me, this was a fun project. This was like, well, I want to know. But then when I started knowing, it was like, ew. And
you're a nerd.
Yeah, I'm a nerd. Exactly.
Right.
And nerds do what nerds do. You take it and go, wait a minute, the data's telling me something.
Right.
And it was a point of making those connections. And one of the scary connections it made, and the reason we actually indexed from 1950 to 1990, which does go beyond and before the actual day of 1953 to 1987, where people can file the claim, was that I noticed in 1959 that actually there was a reversal in birth ratios, and that more women were born than men, which is an unusual effect that happens. It was documented in the Camp Lejeune paper in the second week of 1959. They didn't know why. They just put it in there. And when I looked that up, and if you study that and you look that up, you'll notice Norway and other countries have already decided that that ratio changes comes from chemical contamination.
Mm-hmm.
So there's one more thing that points to all these people going to court, is that what I built is the ability for them to come and get evidence. I'm not a lawyer, but what I give them, and what every lawyer says, you're in charge of your own evidence. It's not their job to find your evidence. You have to find it. So in my own work to try to find this, I put it together. I hired some good guys. Being nerd, other nerds. You jump on it and you tell your buddies, hey, wake up, it's 2:00 in the morning, help me code this. And so we built it. And if you want to share it, it's chemicalcasualties.com. You can go in, and if everybody wants to chat in and have a name looked up, we go by last name. The system is extremely fast. Now, it is only going through the Camp Lejeune newspaper, but we have 500,000 names right now, and it looks like we'll get to 600,000 names. And we should call them name instances, because sometimes someone's name, they might play football a bunch of different times, and they might be mentioned in the paper as getting a touchdown or making a tackle. You have to be careful when you do those kind of searches on our database, because in the sports sections of the Camp Lejeune newspaper, they didn't put ranks, because it's a little embarrassing to have your private tackle your sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
So there was things in that other places ranks were noticed, but we put in the actual years of when that was in the paper, and then we take it to the next step of getting them the PDF, the government document file, everything they need to march into court and go here. And essentially, we're trying to get more funding for it. We're trying to get some philanthropists, I should say, involved in it, so we don't have to charge for it. We'd like to make it free to everybody. We really would.
Right.
The search is free, but after that, it takes work to extract the PDFs and everything else they need from that. And so, but anyone want to ask questions on the chat or anything, please do. I mean, I've done a lot of this, so.
Mark, the deadline, I believe, to file a claim or file a suit again for compensation for the water at Camp Lejeune is coming up in 5 days. Is it August 10th this year?
It is officially August 10th, although one of the lawyers says, believe that falls on a Saturday. So, maybe getting a hold of the lawyers on that Saturday may not be reasonable. However, here's the key. If you try to, file it by doing it online or by doing it by paper, the problem is with that, it may take time. And if you make a mistake, you're out. If you go to an attorney, they're electronically filing. So what they're doing is, I opened up an estate for my mom, who obviously was there and obviously sick. And I just opened that last week. On Monday, I started opening that. The nearby county, which I consider to be small county outside of Washington, D.C., immediately said, oh, Camp Lejeune, you're like the third person who's come in here. And so we know what to do. Give us the paperwork, boom, boom. And in 48 hours, I had a estate open for my mom, which I was executor because she passed away. And I called, and within about 45 minutes, I had the 5 questions I wanted to know answered, and it was sent in electronically to be filed.
Mark, if somebody served at Camp Lejeune and they only found out about this after, let's say they find out about this a week from now or 2 weeks from now, or
Sure.
What recourse do people have? Do they still have a recourse, or is that window shut?
That window would be shut unless they're in the middle of some test, and some lawyers have said maybe possibly we could get you in. However, here's the rule. Here's what you do. You don't wait for the disease. You file, period. Okay.
Mhm.
And you say, I was there 30 non-consecutive days. Doesn't matter if it's consecutive or non-consecutive, but as long, it doesn't have to be anytime between that time period of 53 and 87, if you were there 30 days anywhere, you can file. And when you file, you can file for medical monitoring. And that's important because that means if later on you do develop, let me read off the tracks of diseases so that we understand a little bit here. There are 2 tracks. One track's official. The second track the judges are working on. I've got my cheat sheet here. Track 1, which I'm in, is Parkinson's disease, is one, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, leukemia, kidney cancer, bladder cancer is in what's called track 1. Track 2, which is just waiting for judges to sign off on, pretty much everyone's already agreed upon it, is liver cancer, kidney disease, lung cancer, breast cancer, men and women, prostate cancer. There are at least 2 more tracks they are working on. This is the wacky part about this thing that it just reeks of this insanity, is that they're cutting off the date to file, but they haven't completed figuring out what the diseases are.
Right.
And it's like, well, so everybody's being cautious. So the whole point is, if you've been there and you served and maybe you came in and out or whatever, but you're there, file. What our database does is help people. We have a good case where I talked to a lawyer and we just got chatting about something else. And he said, oh, we've been working about 2.5 years on a Camp Lejeune case where the government will not say that the person was there. They don't show the family there. They don't show them there at all. So I said, what's the name? Give me the name. He gave me the last name. And I said, okay, I found a bunch of hits on that name. It was an odd name. And I said, give me a little more info. He gave me a little more info. I found his wife. His wife was actually part of one of the clubs. She was mentioned in the Camp Lejeune newspaper. It went on to say more things about, who was there and the husband being there, and it glued it together.
Mark, if somebody finds out about this claim process on August 11th, do they just throw up their hands and say, oh, well, I missed the deadline?
Yes.
Okay. Joe Griffiths, you had your hand up for a while.
Listen, I know you're running late, you're over time, but just 3 fast things. Todd and Sean, both you guys, I was talking about you guys over the weekend, and I think this is such a history class that we get every Monday night. Some of the subjects, I like to see these podcasts played in colleges and high schools to educate our students about Gold Star mothers, at Camp Lejeune water, all these subjects, graves registration. Then maybe the public would learn to respect vets a little bit more. Ron, to you, we have a program at the Michael J. Crescents VA Hospital in Philadelphia. It's called First Swing. We've been taking golfers for 18 years that are in here, wheelchairs, that have one prosthetic leg, 2 prosthetic legs. And Johnny C. is a PGA carrying card member, a Vietnam veteran. And Johnny even has taught over 100 veterans that are blind to golf. They teach them how to find a ball. They have a mentor. Todd is sure to give you my information. Contact me. I'll put you in touch with them. And then finally, Alex, you and your brother, God bless both of you and your family for your sacrifice. Alex, the commemoration program down in Washington that is trying to come to an end in March that we're trying to stop. Why did we put limits of 15 years when thanking vets? Why did we put limits when Camp Lejeune water that we waited from 1953 to 1980, and now all of a sudden, sunrise on the 11th, there's no more benefits? Well, in the commemoration program, there's 3 pins. There's a Gold Star family pin that Gold Star mothers really have to apply and fill that out. There's a regular pin, and Todd and Sean, I'm sure you've seen them. They're all over the country now, pinning veterans, thanking them for their service. But Alex, if you get my information from Todd and Sean, I will send you each a pin. It got a blue star on it, but they call it a Gold Star family pin to recognize service members that died. And thank God you and your brother are still alive. But I would like to send you each one of these pins and get my information. We'll get them out to you right away. And thank you for your service. And one other thing, I'm good friends with Curry Ward, W-A-R-D, at the Library of Congress. They have the programs for recording. That one of the programs called 10, 20, 30 History Project, 10 pictures, 20 pages of a book, a diary, letters, or at least a 30-minute interview. Here in the Philadelphia, Delaware Valley area, we use court stenographers at events, veterans events. There's Jewish synagogues that have these great Jewish women. They're taking your history, different organizations, and they box everything up and they send it to the Library of Congress. We can help you get in touch with her just to make your program expand and maybe a little bit more easier for you to do. Because it seems like, you have a lot on your plate, Alex. So that's it.
Joe, you're great. Thank you so much for joining us and for connecting with Alex. And I will connect the two of you. Bob Flage, we are over time, but I'm going to give you the last word tonight.
I just have a question about the Camp Lejeune issue. It doesn't affect me. However, it seemed like an awful lot of private attorneys were soliciting for people to apply. And how much effort was made to dissuade that? Because you said they can apply directly, and here's attorneys, setting up business and taking a portion of that, whatever compensation there was.
Yeah, well, let me address that. There definitely is a number of attorneys that have jumped up and they're all over Google. And the problem, I think, is everybody gets confused. You go up there and Google has 20 pages of attorneys all promising you $1 million. Here's the deal. The truth of it is that no matter what they say, I've been in Zoom meetings with some very large law firms and people who brought the original congressional hearing that Biden signed. Okay. And so far to this date, only 62 people have settled. That's it. And that's only because they took an early offer that the government said that if you were there 35 years ago, which is a weird number because it doesn't go back to 53. If you were there 35 years ago, we'll make you an offer. We'll cut a deal. And they're all horrible. A matter of fact, hundreds of people have turned down those particular deals. Lawyers are suggesting do not take those deals because they haven't even gone to the first trials yet. They're still going through all this. They are going to have, by the end of this year, bellwether cases that will be set up for things like Parkinson's. They're going to take each disease and they're going to take 5 people who have those diseases and then figure out from there what should be a baseline that should be compensated for that disease. Obviously, if you had some sort of cancer and got cured, then they would pay you, but they would say, hey, you got cured and you're better now and everything. Parkinson's, I'm going to die from. It's just that simple. My friend died from Parkinson's. He's involved in Agent Orange, things like that. I don't know anyone who lives through it. They might give you medicine, but I don't know anyone who lives through this yet. So Parkinson's is high on the list. But this is the point. You can't go by all the attorneys because they're all saying great things. But if they don't file these things right, if they don't have electronic filing capabilities with the government, if they haven't set that up, where they can just send in a spreadsheet and here's 5 lines and boom, you get a number, then that's not going to happen. The government has 6 months to respond to that. They can actually respond to your claim and make an offer. So far, the government has never responded to any claim of the 330,000 at all. They never responded to any. They're all letting them go to court. Okay. There is a bill right now. It's HR 8545. It is a House representative bill that's being pushed through right now. It will change the compensation rules for attorneys. Right now, attorneys are getting like 40%. If they take the case, this will cut it down to 25% if it goes to litigation, 20% if it does not go to litigation. It changes the rules so that you don't have to drink out of a faucet, as the government claims. Basically, you can have one of these canteens, get it filled up from your Buffalo that was in there at the base and drink out of it, or like swim in the pool, or like me, be bottle fed, and that it will be covered. So there's a lot of modifications going on with the bill right now. Again, all these modifications are going on after the drop dead date, which is, again, I agree with you. It's crazy, that we're doing this now, but it shouldn't, the 40% that these attorneys might hit for shouldn't stop anyone from moving forward, because if you win $1 million, that's still $600,000 in your pocket. And I would point out, in a federal case, that would be tax-free. The other side of that is this bill, if it goes through, which it looks like it will, because it's only a technical change bill. Once that goes through and gets signed by whoever president, okay, then that's going to affect those payouts and make all attorneys go down to that 25%. No matter what they sign for you, they're going to have a cap. So I think it doesn't make any sense not to sign. It doesn't make any sense not to go out there if you can prove it.
All right. Hey, Mark, that's going to have to be the last word. Thank you very much for joining us, Mark. I hope you'll join us again, especially if you have any updates with either the website or the Camp Lejeune claims. Thank you to everybody for hanging in there for this past hour and 45 minutes for this wonderful conversation with you. It's always wonderful. I hope to see you on Thursday night. Take care. Have a good evening, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.